In Arcana City, the Quince estate stood in silence. It was empty aside from the pale, young woman waiting in the living room. Even so, the air was thick with tension. Letitia Holloway sat on the sofa, her legs crossed. She glanced at her watch, only to crinkle her forehead in annoyance. She'd been sitting here for 2 hours, and she was already exhausted. How could she not be? Just yesterday, her Fiasna's grandfather had decided it was everyone's best interest to send her to the doctor for a premarital examination. "We need to make sure that you're a virgin." "Nothing but the best for my son," he'd said gruffly. It had all turned south when they heard the results. Not only did the Sarandon family wish to break off the engagement, but they also demanded that they be able to purchase the orchid garden in return for the public humiliation her fiancé had suffered. They wanted to get their money-grubbing hands on the only thing her mother had left her. What's worse, her father had remained a silent doormat. "You have no use for it," he scoffed, shrugging her off. "Just sell the property to them. We'll get more from doing that than keep it." Now that her mother was gone, Letitia only had herself to rely on. And though she was a board member of the once powerful Holloway Corporation, she was absolutely no match for the Sarandon family, which was why she had to compromise and agree to her grandfather's request. To enter an arranged marriage. Her beautiful features were drawn in anxiety. With her pursed lips and gloomy eyes, she was far from the bright woman others had grown envious of. She had reverted to a mouse, timid and scared for what was to come. The doors suddenly flew open. A dark shadow of a man slid into the room, and she squinted to see who it was. As he moved into the light, she took in a face so handsome that she stiffened in response. He looked like a scholar who could have been portrayed in a painting. He had high cheekbones and a strong jawline, and he exuded grace and elegance. Not at all what she'd expected, given the vicious rumors she'd heard about him. Letitia lowered her teacup and stood. "Mr. Quince." Ezra Quince sized up the woman in front of him. She was delicate and petite, with eyes as beautiful as starlight. Her complexion was the color of cream, with not a flaw in sight. Your father hadn't been exaggerating when he described her looks. She really ran. Yes. He approached a second sofa a short distance from where she stood. "Please sit." Letitia returned to her seat. She could feel her hands fidgeting on her lap as her heart raced. A few minutes ago, she'd been anxious about meeting him, and now that she had, a part of her wanted to jump up and run, far away from this house. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to calm down. "Get yourself together. Letty. These actions didn't go unnoticed by Ezra, who raised his eyebrows. Are you really going to marry me? There was a brief silence before she responded, yes. How much do you know about me? Know about him. She glanced up, surprise flashing over her features. Although they had never crossed paths before, Ezra Quince was an incredibly influential man, and with that power came a lot of baggage. His name was never far from mention in gossip columns, and the tabloids had been vicious. They say I'm despicable and violent, vicious and cruel, perverted and crude. Although his words were blunt, they still held a certain gentleness. Some even have called me gay. Should I share anything else? Is he testing me? Look, Mr. Quince, I didn't know you before all of this, she stated. Although I've heard the rumors, I know how harmful they can be, and I know exactly how false some of them might be. That's why I won't trust them until I'm able to make my own assessment. He blinked in surprise, then gave her a slow smile. If you were to marry me, I wouldn't love you, nor would I touch you. But that doesn't mean I'll allow you to betray me either, he said firmly. So, do you still want to marry me? Letitia Holloway couldn't ask for more. Yes. A brave one, aren't you? Shrugging, he stood up and motioned for her to do the same. Come with me. She furrowed her eyebrows as she watched his retreating figure. Although confused, she scrambled up and followed him down a narrow corridor. She furrowed her eyebrows as she watched his retreating figure. Although confused, she scrambled up and followed him down a narrow corridor. They walked in silence until he grasped a dark bronze handle. With a glance in her direction, he pushed the door open, then motioned her to precede him into what appeared to be a darkened room. In the dim light, all Letitia could see were makeshift gray figures that looked like walls, looming over her. She raised her hand and felt a wall beside her. Thinking she'd gotten it all figured out, she stepped forward, only to be met with empty air. She stumbled forward. Ezra turned in her direction, and she jumped into his arms without a second thought, feeling them wrap around her to hold her steady. For a moment, they felt the whole world stop. He held his breath and stiffened, and she froze. Suddenly, she remembered what someone had told her about him. He has gerophobia, especially when it comes to his contact with women. You're not allowed to touch his body without his permission. If you do, you'll face serious consequences. Crap. She hurriedly stepped back. I didn't do it on purpose, she quickly apologized, her heart squeezing in terror. I couldn't see clearly, and as soon as the lights were turned off, I lost my footing. Eyes. And I am she way you please. She was still trying to explain herself when he turned on a light and directed her down a set of stairs. As soon as the room flashed brightly before her, Letitia squeezed her eyes shut. However, once her eyes adjusted, she peeked at the basement and then screamed at what she saw before her. Her knees threatened to give out. Ezra Quince raised his eyebrows. Do you still want to marry me after seeing all of this? Letitia Holloway gulped, staring at the man in front of her in a daze. On the far end of the wall were knives and whips. Shells held collars with spikes. While some were made of steel and metal, the others were carved from wood, looking as if they'd just been dug up from the Middle Ages. Seeing him standing before the wall of implements of torture, she couldn't help but tremble. Ezra Quince was far from the elegant and gracious man he had seemed to be back in the living room, and now she could definitely see why some people would believe the rumors about him. She steadied herself. He observed her the entire time. Although his face revealed nothing, he was surprised. Just now, he had actually assisted her down the steps, yet his heart hadn't stirred in annoyance and hatred as it used to whenever he was around women. Instead, he'd felt a rush of warmth. Could it be that he hadn't had the time to react properly? Or was there something else? Letitia Holloway straightened her back, forcing herself to look him in the eye. Do you want me to not marry you? You haven't answered my question yet, he said. Although his thoughts were muddled, Ezra continued to gaze at her, his interest piqued. After seeing all of this, do you still want to marry me? She nodded without hesitation. Yes. You must be desperate if you're not going to jump ship now, he scoffed, walking closer to her. When they were a foot apart, he whispered, being married to me would only be a curse for a woman like you. How would you know if it's a curse? For all I know, it could be my only salvation. The two of them stared at each other for a long time. While his eyes were cold and curious, hers glinted with determination. She wouldn't be sent running by mere threats and accusations, which only served to intrigue him further. When he still hadn't responded, she quickly said, "If you don't despise me, then please marry me. I promise that I'll stick to your rules. I won't touch you, and I won't betray you. In this house, we be nothing but strangers, I promise." The coldness of his face faded just a bit. "This isn't the place for you to propose. Why don't we go out and finish this conversation?" Her cheeks flushed. Yes, they left the basement with its disturbing contents and returned to the huge living room. Glistening chandeliers greeted her as she walked in, and she couldn't help but blink in relief. Ezra Quince sat down, still distant, but his posture seemed more relaxed. He leaned in her direction. "Tell me, what do you want? I need to borrow your power and influence." "So you plan on using me?" he asked, his disgust evident. She swallowed nervously, then took a deep breath. "I want to protect the garden my mother left to me, but I can't do it from my position within the Holloway family. Our family has been declining. We're no match for them. And who is this them? Sarandon Corporation and its family." Ezra Quince smiled at her. Marrying you would seem more of a hassle than a benefit, don't you think? He stretched out his arms over the back of the couch he sat on. Marriage isn't something I'm looking for right now, so unless you can give me a better reason do I gain one more enemy. But I'd also have to cry, I'm afraid. He coexisted with you. Letitia's shoulders sagged at the rejection. He was the most powerful man in Arcana City, and with his gorgeous appearance, he could have been unstoppable if he wanted to be. She couldn't help but feel disappointed, but what reason could she give to get him to marry her? Here in Arcana City, the Quince family were the only ones who'd ever dared go up against the Sarandons because of their bad reputation. Other than her own family, who else would be willing to stand up to them? Not only did most other families not have the financial capability, but the Sarandons had kept good ties with almost everyone in the business. Letitia left Ezra Quince's villa in defeat, walking to her car. There she saw that her phone had been vibrating in her passenger seat this entire time. She furrowed her eyebrows. Why was Bill calling her? Bill, something happened. Go hide. What is it? That shameless old man Sarandon decided to hold a press conference. He says that he wants to cancel your engagement with Shane, saying that you lost your virginity before the wedding. Bill spat out, disgusted. He also said that you decided to let them buy the orchid garden as compensation. Letitia's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Were they really that impatient? If you show up there, you'll be skinned alive by those bastards, Bill warned. Stay out of the spotlight for now. No way. Where's the press conference? Why? Do you have a plan? Do you think young Mr. Quince will want you once the news is out? Bill asked. Look, you can run away if you offend the Sarandons, but there's no way you'll survive if you offend the Quinces. Listen, don't do anything stupid. Now's not the time to be ruled by your emotions. They need to be addressed promptly. Letitia turned her head to glance back at the Quince villa before taking a deep breath. If she didn't take a gamble now, then what would happen to her?